Good morning. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a great holiday season and that we're all back to work and we're thawed out a little bit. Um, hey, I am happy to introduce to you some you know, Dr. Alyson Lerma. Alyson works for Knox County. She is our world language specialist and has 11 years of experience as a teacher. Has been in this position for 3 years with Knox County Schools and has her doctorate in world language and is doing a wonderful job for Knox County with our diverse groups, with all of the different we have in Knox County. And I was so surprised. I heard Alyson's presentation, and this would be great for LMU School of Education. You know, it pertains to the same as in grade school education and higher education, that these things you need to be aware of as we increase in our classrooms with students of different. Without further delay, I would like to present to you Alyson Lerma.
Morning, how are you all? Never got my teacher voice, so this handy dandy microphone is going to be very nice. Is this okay or is this too loud? So no shouting. All right, thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. It is so nice to be here and to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, not just personally, but also professionally. Again, my name is Alyson Lerma. I am the supervisor of world languages and English language learners in Knox County Schools. And I also oversee our immigrant program as well as our migrant ed program. So all of those federal programs, they're wrapped up into one. Wanted to talk with you all today, not that I'm necessarily going to share any information that you don't know, but just to highlight some of the issues, both nationwide in Tennessee and also in Knox County, about diversity, and to really think about how do we define diversity, and what are some of the things that when we think about diversity maybe change over time, or have changed and we have not necessarily kept up with what the definitions currently are. I did not make copies because usually everyone these days is wireless, so if you would like to download the PowerPoint, this is the website where you can access my presentation. If you're like me, I always like to know how many more slides, particularly when we've been going on for a little while. It's nice to see there's 15 more, 16 more. So it would be padlet.com/wall/LMU diversity, and that would just allow you to download the presentation. Did everyone get that? And so just a general outline of what I would like to discuss with you all today. And Trent, please stop me. I usually try to contain my energy in one side of the room, but I really do like to move around a lot, so I'll try to stay within the frame of focus. Just to talk a little bit about introduction and questions, I always like to, as a good educator, like to begin with questions, to discuss some general information, discuss a little bit about my research, and then also some nationwide trends in research on the topic of diversity as it relates to our Hispanic populations, to talk about the implications. This one is really important, particularly for the people in this room, because you all conduct research on topics related to educational issues, and you also help prepare future educators, and then also people who currently work in the field of education. So that's why this one's really important. And then just a general wrap-up, and if you all have any questions and or comments, we can share those at that time. So I'm definitely going to try to be respectful of your time. I know you've been, or maybe your classes are still not back in session. I don't know if this is a day off or not. Oh, you're back. Okay, so probably have a lot of catch-up to do, so I'll definitely be respectful of your time. What we're going to do first, I would like to assess your knowledge of our Hispanic populations. We're going to also talk a little bit about the state of education of Latinos and Latinas, the reported importance of school staff members on students' schooling experiences and also on their sense of identity. They're going to be the reason why expectations. So I would like for you to think about your personal and your professional experiences, and I hope you're not offended by this, but this is really important. One thing that when we talk a lot about diversity, we talk about perception. And your perception is your reality. Whether it's maybe a warped sense of reality according to some people, that's your reality. That's what you live. So just want you to think a little bit about what beliefs you all have about the role and the importance of education in the lives of students and their parents. So just think about that. And this is something that's really essential too for people who are in the education profession, people who are teachers or who want to be teachers. What do they think about education? What do they think it can do for students or perhaps not do? Secondly, what are some of the biggest issues facing our Hispanic students, and how do we know those are big issues? How do we know those are challenges? And thirdly, when I say Hispanic students, what comes to mind? What visual do you have in your mind when I say the words Hispanic students? So, being in the School of Education, I imagine your answer to question number 1 would look something like this if we were to do a word cloud or a wordle. The words that are bigger and bolder are the words that would probably come up more frequently. So words like support, future in terms of academic success, or getting a good salary, or having a stable job, important, families. So these are words that probably we would all have in common when we think about why is education important for students. Question number 2, what are the issues that Hispanic students face? Do the issues that they face, are those in common with what other groups have as challenges? And if they are in common, why? And if they're not, why not? What is special about these groups, or what is special about these issues? Are there challenges that only they face? And how do we know this? So how do we know? And I'll talk a little bit about this in just a bit. And the third question, quite honestly, when I show this, that second slide that you'll see in a moment really gets people thinking, and usually they have comments at the end. Which images come to mind? When I said Hispanic students, did you think of people in business suits? Did you think of students wearing graduation caps and gowns? Cesar Chavez, here we have Sonia Sotomayor, the first Latino on the Supreme Court. And that's my little boo bug up there in the top corner. So she's actually half Hispanic, so she's blonde, she's light-skinned. Did you think of this? Or did you think of this? This is an important question because our educators, when they look at data that's just numbers that says Hispanic students, poverty level, education level, parents' education level, language spoken at home, immigrant status, which actually we don't ask about that, but sometimes that does come up in the course of conversation. These are images that often are associated with our students. And when I say our students, I just mean Hispanic students in general. Okay? So we have a long history in our country. Actually, the sign up there was portrayed, it was displayed in public until the 1970s. So quite a bit after the mainstream civil rights movement. So if you have a smartphone and you would like to participate, I have a quiz. Again, this is a good example of an educational lesson. A little difficult to read, but I'll click here and we can see. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, so just a little pre-quiz. What percentage of Latinos graduate in the U.S. from high school? Okay. Have you all used Poll Everywhere? No? Okay, so we'll click here. Because when we talk about academic success, one of the benchmarks is graduation from secondary school. Okay, that's one of the benchmarks. If you believe, here on the left, you have the percentages. If you believe, for example, that 28% of Hispanics graduate nationwide from high school, what you will do is you will text that code 322 808 to the number at the top. So everyone will actually send a text message to the second line where it says text a code to 37607. So if you want to participate, please do so. And this is the point where I say all message rates apply and things like that. So do you think it's 26 to 37%, 49 to 60%, 72 to 83, or 89 to 94? So I know that Dr. Brown right now is probably trying to control his breathing because this is not a scientific survey. So we know that these numbers are not necessarily the most precise or accurate, but it's just really neat too for teachers. This is a really quick way that they can get students to do in-class surveys and use their cell phone because that's always something kiddos like too. And obviously as people text in and update, the bar graphs will update. And we're back to this at the very end to see just how close we were. So we're kind of split with particularly with the first two categories. So we're going to say between, oh, no. All right, so we're evening out a little bit more. Between 26 and 37%, and then 49 to 60%. We're going to say that Hispanic students earn a regular high school diploma every year. Okay, so I have two more questions for you. Here's the next one. What percentage of Latino or Hispanic, and I'm using those terms interchangeably, I probably should have mentioned that. Using those terms interchangeably, what percentage of students do you think are undocumented? And I do not use the term illegal because when we're talking about kids, that those two things don't go together for me. Kids and illegal. I use the term undocumented or unauthorized. So when we talk about our undocumented students, K-12, is it less than 5%, 20%, 40%, or more than 60%? And as a reminder, this is nationwide. This is not in Tennessee or Knoxville. Okay, so for the most part, again, almost half and half, either 20 or 40%, and then maybe one or two people are going to say more than 60%. And the final question, this is a really easy one, and again, for a grade, so this is a good thing. What similarities did various Hispanic students in California and in Tennessee, let's think about those two states for a moment, the population, the education system, report about their schooling experiences. And when I talk about schooling experiences, I mean K-12 public school experiences. So if you feel that two of the things that they both mentioned, groups from California and from Tennessee, felt racist treatment by students and staff, that would be the first one. Obviously feelings of isolation, being included in the school culture, participating in school activities, or would it be C and D or A and B? Okay, so we have a wide variety of responses here. 777 and then 53 and 27. So we'll definitely also talk about this towards the end of the presentation and come back to your answers. So thank you for indulging me. And again, this is really important because when we talk about perceptions and we talk about diversity, we're talking about what our backgrounds are and how those backgrounds and those experiences impact the people with whom we work, whether that's future educators or we're talking about students from various diverse groups. So just to share some general information, when we talk about our Hispanic populations, and you'll see in a moment why I use the term populations. We're talking about the fastest growing, the youngest, and the most uneducated group in our society today. Okay, that's nationwide. Here, I don't know if it's difficult to see, but I circled Tennessee, obviously. When we look at the percent increase of Hispanics living in the state of Tennessee, there was a 201 to 300% increase in 2010, between 2000 and 2010. Knox County also experienced about a 300% increase, as did some of our local neighboring counties. That doesn't mean that our Hispanic population is huge, but what it does mean is that we've experienced rapid growth in this demographic area. In the 2010 census, and I don't know if you all remember, there was even quite a controversy over how to denote that someone was Hispanic or not. Did that mean that you check white and Hispanic, or could you be both, or one or the other? Was it exclusive? So those are debates that are relevant today and that will still continue to be relevant, I imagine, for the next census. But in the last census, and this was now 4 years ago, Hispanics made up almost 20% of the U.S. population. And so whites are no longer the majority, and Hispanics will soon be the majority minority. Okay. When we talk about Latinos, when we're talking about populations, we have various subgroups. We have people who speak different native languages. Perhaps Spanish is not their first language. When we're talking about students and families from Central America, it's very common that the first language would be a native language derived from Maya. So for example, Conjubal or Actec would be one of the native languages. So Spanish would actually be a second language. When students come to us sometimes, come to us in kindergarten or after that, would be then that they're learning a third language, which is Spanish. When we talk about Hispanic populations, one distinguishing factor is also country of origin. There's a big difference between students coming from, for example, Spain, who would speak Spanish, or from Mexico, or from Puerto Rico, or actually, obviously, we're talking about U.S. citizens, not a country, but a territory. Immigration status, we talk about, is this a first-generation immigrant, second-generation immigrant? Are we talking about students who are permanent residents, who are U.S. citizens, either by being born here or going through the formal process to become a citizen? Or are we talking about students who are kind of in a gray area, who are perhaps undocumented and or maybe came unaccompanied, meaning that they came by themselves to this country and they're under the age of 18. Their age, again, when we talk about Hispanics, we're talking about the youngest demographic group in our country. The average age is 22, I think is what I heard in the latest figures. Educational attainment. Historically, looking at research, Hispanic students from Cuba have the highest level of education. Students from Mexico and some countries in Central America have the lowest level of formal education. When we talk about Hispanics, we're also talking about different races. Hispanics can be all colors, all sizes, all shapes. It's no longer where you can look at a picture like this and say both of these little girls are Latina. They're both Hispanic. One is my goddaughter and the other one's my daughter. Also, geographical location. In the 2000 census, most Hispanics lived in certain geographical areas. They were centered in, as I'm sure you would imagine, California, Texas, around the Chicago area, New York. That's changing. Those are still big Hispanic areas, but now we've seen a flight to rural areas, areas in East Tennessee, for example. When we look at the research, historically, Hispanic children are more likely than their peers to experience the following: live in poverty, to not be enrolled in pre-K programs. Again, this is nationwide. They're more likely to move multiple times, so we're talking about students with an interruption in their formal schooling. And it could be that they're moving between counties. It could be that they're moving from one country to another, or something, some combination thereof. They're more likely than their peers to speak a language other than English in their homes, to score lower on the NAEP assessments. They're more likely to be in remedial classes and not to be enrolled in advanced placement classes. They are more likely to not graduate from high school, and they have the smallest completion rate of GED earners. And then also, they're the least likely to attend university or college. Although this is changing. I've seen some recent research that actually contradicts this. So I put 2 asterisks there, and then at the first one, to live in poverty, it depends how we're going to define poverty. This refers to free and reduced lunch rates. Because I think if you read some more reports, you will see actually that they're not the most likely to live in poverty. So again, when we talk about Hispanics in Tennessee, and specifically in Knox County, we don't have a huge Hispanic presence in Knox County, or even in our state. In 2012, the Hispanic enrollment, K-12 in our state, in Knox County, we had 4.4%. And again, 5.4. These numbers probably are fairly accurate, but you also get into the issue of identity and remember of how you define yourself. Some people don't identify as Hispanic. They would, if you were to ask someone, "Are you Hispanic?" that person might say, "No, I'm Mexican," or "I'm Colombian," or "I'm American." And so these are accurate, but just to keep in mind, too, it's a little more complex than that. The Hispanic graduation rate in Tennessee in 2011 was 81%, and in Knox County it was 94%. Excuse me, and that was 2012, and then the previous year had been 79. When we think about diversity, we obviously think about groups of people who are not just Hispanic. When we talk about our ESL department in Knox County, we serve 2,400 students. And of those 2,400 students, we have 72 languages spoken, and we have students from 67 different countries. So again, we're talking about a small percentage of our student population of almost 60,000. But when you talk about diversity, and we talk about the ELL department, it doesn't get much more diverse than that. In 2009, we had 28 ESL teachers. We now have 62. So we are growing so rapidly that it's difficult sometimes to keep up. Most of our ELs are Spanish-speaking and Hispanic. Although I do want to note, again, just because someone is Hispanic, it doesn't mean he or she is Spanish-speaking, and vice versa. It's interesting if you look at our data on the enrollment of students, the language and the ethnicity change. When we look at elementary school students, we're talking about the vast majority of our students are Spanish-speaking. 82% are U.S. citizens, which means they're born here, and they enter kindergarten having heard limited English, but they are U.S. citizens by birth. That changes as we go to middle school and then to high school. And I didn't bring those statistics today, but if you'd be interested, I can certainly share those with you. So we've talked a little bit about Hispanics in general across the country. When we look at Hispanic students in Tennessee, historically, according to the data that's published, we've done fairly well. Latino students here in the state of Tennessee have scored above the national NAEP assessment scores, the average. They have lower expulsions for disciplinary-related issues than the national average. We are above the national graduation rate, both in Knox County and in the state of Tennessee. But we also have a rapidly growing school-age population and a high percentage who live in poverty. And again, we're talking about a very different kind of poverty when we look at inner city versus rural poverty. So don't let these statistics maybe lull you into a sense of the fact that we're meeting all of their needs or doing a great job in the state necessarily. And it was this third one, the third point here, that really sparked an interest I had already had about students who are Hispanic who graduate from high school. And this turned out to be really important for my research because when I went back and looked, and I will say that my research did not involve anyone from Knox County or the district where I worked when I did my research, the school district reported 100% graduation, but 3 of the people I interviewed actually dropped out from that school district. So I'll talk a little bit about that and why that means that those types of studies do have relevance and importance. So if we know all of this, what is it that we would want to find out? I have 1,000 questions. I don't know about you all. How could we design a study that would answer these central questions? The third one, which data sources would we access? Because the data to which I had access said actually that we were doing a phenomenal job in the state of Tennessee, but that might not be reflective of what the true circumstances are. And then most importantly, something that we all struggle with, how do we filter out our experiences and our perceptions to make sure that we're not projecting or we're not bringing our maybe negative or incorrect assumptions onto a situation. So I'll talk a little bit about my research. The title of my dissertation was Si se puede after Cesar Chavez, which translates roughly to Yes, we can, the perceived realities of Latina dropouts from American high schools. Just very briefly, a little bit about my research. I conducted in-person interviews with people who self-identify as Hispanic who had not completed requirements in an American high school. The youngest person I interviewed was 15, and she was this was the hardest interview, she was a very recent dropout. It had just been a couple weeks, actually, and she didn't intentionally drop out. So that's something else I'll talk about, too. But I did a qualitative study, and I interviewed my participants in Spanish, and I transcribed the interviews from Spanish to English, and then just kept using grounded theory or modified grounded theory methodology, just kept going through for the themes that kept coming up the most often. This was the graphic that kind of resulted from that. These were the themes that were predominant across all of the interviews. It might be a little difficult to read, but if you pull it up on your screen, hopefully you can see it. There were 3 what I called mega themes. The first down here at the bottom, the base, which is the source of who we are, and it's through that we filter everything. School, family, work, play. For the students I interviewed, or the former students, the big mega theme was negotiating Hispanicity and their student identities. How did they deal with being Hispanic and being students? Because all of them saw those as 2 separate and not related things. And then there were categories, secondary themes that emerged within those. Internalizing racism, struggling to communicate, and living an undocumented life. The second mega theme was navigating unfamiliar terrain. And here we're talking about both formal rules, things like attendance, and if you miss school, you have to have a note, and if you don't have a note, you have to go here, and if you don't go here, you've got to go to court and things like that. But then also we're talking about unwritten rules, like social rules and cultural expectations. Do you raise your hand if you have a question? If you need to use the restroom, is it okay to do that? And then also things like, just as every human being, particularly teenager, just wanting to be included in school activities. And the final one, there at the top of the triangle, was capitulating to harsh realities, coming to the realization that they weren't going to graduate from high school, or actually that they had, again, dropped out unintentionally and wouldn't have that option. So I have about 9 slides here of some of the quotes from the participants in my study. And again, these are translated from Spanish to English, and I know that you all can read very well, but I'll just read them, and feel free if you have them on your device to just go through. I think it's even more powerful when you think about the people I interviewed, people I had never met, people who shared some of the most intimate details with me, a complete stranger. Keeping in mind that while I do speak Spanish, and Dr. Davidson and I have talked about this quite a bit, and Dr. Rogers and I don't look like someone upon first glance who would be able to communicate with the people I interviewed on the level that I did. And so it was a bit difficult there at the beginning to kind of explain, we do have some things in common, and it's okay to share with me. So one of the secondary themes was internalizing racism. Veronica dropped out from a school district here in East Tennessee. And what she said was, quote, "You would see some teachers and principals talking and laughing with other students in the hallway. That never happened to me. And I never saw them talking to Hispanic kids either. Not once. They never expressed an interest in us like we didn't exist." And again, we're not saying that this is actually how things were. We're just saying this was her perception. We're saying that this young lady who has 2 children who are U.S. citizens, who plans to stay in that same school system, she's had these experiences, and this is her perception of school. There was the second student who dropped out from that same district who reported a 100% graduation rate. When I came here from Texas, I was like, what is this? The students and teachers, they were so rude, and the students were rednecks. They called me names like wetback and said I was illegal. They would ask me if I was legally here. The teachers never said anything to me, but I could feel the way they looked at me. And she also said, it's like they didn't even want to help me. When I would raise my hand in class or something, the teacher would roll her eyes. In Texas, I was just another Mexican. And it's very ironic, Estefania's father teaches GED courses. He has a master's degree. He teaches GED courses in Spanish and English here in East Tennessee. When we talk about that human need to want to be included in something, this is another common theme that arose from students who did not complete high school in California, some of whom entered school there in kindergarten and went all the way to high school but didn't complete, and students here in Tennessee. So one example of this was Emilio, who said, quote, "There were dances and pep rallies, but they never asked us, do you want to participate with the others?" They never asked us. We went and watched, but never participated. We didn't know what was going on. I would have liked to take part in something like that. And he actually went on to explain to me he still didn't understand what a pep rally was, and I found it difficult to explain as well, so I don't know that I did a great job with that. But some things, I guess, are just beyond translation. He also said, in relation to this part of the discussion, quote, "Maybe they would have found a great footballer, golfer, or musician if they had tried to include us. I would have liked it if someone had wanted to do that with me in school." So it's not important just to think about our school day of math, even recess, but also to think about those opportunities before and after school. Juliana, struggling to communicate. In our hour interview, she used the word English 57 times. Okay, so once almost every minute. She said, speaking English usually means somebody is smart. They learn everything so fast because they speak English. Not me. It's much harder for me to learn. For Mexico, I was smart in math, but once I came here, I wasn't smart in math anymore. I didn't understand. So we as educators know that that certainly wasn't the case. But again, her perception and her reality, and she even said that she still can't do math, that she's still not smart because she still struggles to speak English. Of the students that I interviewed, 2 were U.S. citizens, 1 was a permanent resident, and the rest were unauthorized. This is one person who talked about living an undocumented life, meaning that his name did not appear anywhere officially, did not have a social security number, wasn't able to apply to universities, can't get a loan, can't receive any type of financial aid. And And again, I'm not making any political statements. I'm just saying, again, the reality. Jesus said, I always kept in my mind that I was from another country, and every time I did anything, it was just there. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it was different. I knew I was illegal. I felt different from the fact that I was both Mexican and undocumented. We had two separate identity components there. It started out with me feeling bad, like when it came time for TCAPs. You would sit there with your paper, they would pass out your booklet, and and they would call your name out and verify your social security number, which I don't know that we still do that, but anyway, that was kind of alarming as well. I didn't have a social security, and I felt embarrassed at times, but then after that, I just got over it. I got to where I didn't care, but it was always there. That was one more thing that separated me, that made me different. And again, Jesus still lives in this area, has family in this area, and actually has a daughter who's less than a year old and plans to stay here. So his daughter's a U.S. citizen and will enroll in school here as such. Gabriela talked about the same thing. And I won't read this one to you, but just talking about her father making up a social security number on the form, because we know really we can't require a social security number, but people who aren't familiar with Supreme Court decisions don't necessarily know that. And so her father saw the blanks. He thought he had to fill out every single thing, and so he put a number in. And she talked about actually having nightmares, worried that they would come to school because they had found out she didn't have a real social security number. Gabriela attended a school here in East Tennessee, and she was going to a city school, and her parents moved over the holiday break, and she also turned 18 during that break. And when she went to enroll in her new school, which was a county school, the school would not accept her because she was 18. So she is a dropout, but she didn't plan to be. It wasn't her intention. She just didn't realize that schools had the luxury or the right to say, we're not going to accept you because you're legally an adult. When we talk about maneuvering official channels and all of these rules and regulations, Martine was a U.S. citizen. As far as I know, still lives here, has a family here. And he said, quote, "It's kind of funny." Well, not really. I'm Hispanic, but I'm a citizen of this country, and I had to leave school. But my older brother doesn't have papers. He's not here legally, but he has a diploma. He graduated from high school here in Tennessee, and I can't even get in school. That's messed up. And he also, what happened with him and his sister, she was another participant in my study. She was 15. Their father and mother were going through divorce. The father took the two children to Mexico and did not come back for 6 months. And the school labeled them as truant, did not label them as dropouts. So the school claimed 100% graduation rate at the end of the year, but they wouldn't let the kids back in school. And I do know this for a fact because I spoke with the principal. The school called a week later and said we couldn't attend classes because it wouldn't be fair to us or to the teachers because we needed to earn so many credits. They said we should go get our GEDs. And the young lady, I've kept in touch with her, she completed her GED in 2 months. She had scored in the 80th percentile on her English TCAP and in the 70s in her science and math TCAP before she left for Mexico. So she's done well. And I'm almost finished with the quotes. Again, Emilio talking about navigating this unfamiliar terrain, and he had probably one of the saddest situations because, again, he wasn't familiar with the processes or the procedures. So he said, I think about not graduating every day. This young man was 24 years old at the time. He said, every day I think about that certificate. Why didn't they let my parents know that I wasn't going to graduate, that they were only going to give me a sheet of paper that wasn't going to be worth anything to allow me to continue studying? And then he also said, I didn't know that it wasn't going to be worth anything. I really want to go back to the school and throw the paper on the desk and say to them, what good is this to me? He did not take the English TCAP, but did not know that he had to in order to graduate. And he was the third student from this local school district who did not graduate. In December, the school district gave him a certificate of attendance, and he thought that was a diploma. His parents had a graduation party for him, and he did not realize he had not graduated from high school until he applied to ITT. And ITT said, you know, you sent us your certificate of attendance, thank you, but we need a copy of your diploma. And he said, well, that's it. So he didn't realize that he actually wasn't a high school graduate. And again, I won't read this one because I don't want to take up so much of your all's time. Jesus talked about how easy it was to drop out. He didn't know you could, and he heard two people talking about it and decided that's what he was going to do. He went, he made up a lie to the counselor, and the next day he had officially withdrawn from high school. And he summed it up there at the end. He said, yeah, it ended very quickly. I thought it was quite a bit ridiculous, or a little bit ridiculous. One of the things, though, that I took away from this, and that I think is really important to remember, and is why we work in education, is because we believe in the potential of every student, regardless of his or her background, his or her language, his or her personal experiences. And this is one theme also that resonated with the participants in my study, is that even though they had these experiences that really could have crippled other people, they remained optimistic that Hispanics still could be successful. And that was really important because one of the participants said, anything is possible. We can do it, we just need a little help. And I think that's important for us to remember too as we work with both current and future educators, that it's not a luxury we have to give up on kids when we think about the many groups of students that we serve. And then the big question, other than how do you know, is why does this matter? What are the implications of this information, of learning about the demographic information, learning about the responses of some participants in a study? Why is this important? And so the first one, obviously, that we've talked a bit about today is the perceptions and how we define diversity. How do we define it as an institution or as a group or even on an individual level? If you're going to talk about social justice, what are the moral and potentially legal implications? We're talking about perceptions of school in general, which is going to be a continuous cycle as people have children and those children go through the U.S. school system of our country, of the dominant culture, for now dominant culture a little bit, and expectations. The influence on future generations, the existence of Hispanic populations and the diverse needs that each of those subgroups have, to better inform and empower educators so that we have the information we need to be able to meet the needs as best we can of our students and families. And then for research, how do we provide a full picture of such a complex problem that really doesn't seem complex if you look just at the numbers, at the percentages, at the graduation rates and the test scores and so forth. Really can shed some light on complex, complicated, and controversial issues. So let's go back to your quiz to answer the following question. Again, we're doing well in Tennessee according to the statistics, but nationwide we're talking about 40 to 50%. And I think we said, or I think you all said something similar to that. Am I correct? Yes, so 50% said that about 40%. Oh no, excuse me, that's incorrect. That's the wrong one. 42% said 26 to 37, and then 42, 49 to 60, so the majority thought it was less than 60. So the people in that second category are correct. And again, it's how you're defining dropout. The regulations have gotten much more specific, where school districts now have to follow up on students leaving. If a student comes in and says, I'm withdrawing, I'm moving to Ohio, we can't just say, okay, that's a transfer. Actually, the school now has the burden of calling the school district or getting some type of information that the student has actually enrolled. So we can't just mark that off as a move or transfer. Our second question, what percentage of Latino students is undocumented? In my study, most of the participants were undocumented, but actually nationwide, only about 2% of Hispanic students are unauthorized. 2%. And again, it's probably anywhere from 1.5 to 5 because those numbers are difficult to come by because we can't legally ask about immigrant status. And the third part, which pertains specifically to my research, what similarities did Hispanic students from California and from Tennessee report as being common? And so it was actually A and B. When you think about California, we're talking about the schools that the students attended and from which they dropped out were schools in which and Hispanic students were the majority. So they still felt feelings of isolation and reported racist treatment, perceived racist treatment by students and staff. And so then this one, 50%. So you all did pretty well. So I tried, once I saw the topic, the very general topic of today's discussion was diversity issues for the educator, I thought, wow, how can I share so much information? I don't know that I shared anything with you that would be new other than perhaps what my specific study focused on, but hopefully at least some information that can be useful as you work with both current and future educators. That when we talk about diversity, how are we defining diversity? When we talk about our subgroups, how are we defining the people we're putting in those subgroups, and what does that mean for students and even for things like money and programming and much bigger issues. So that's kind of, as we say, the quick and dirty version.